A participle is a form of a verb that is used in a sentence to modify a noun phrase, verb, or verb phrase, and then plays a role similar to an adjective or adverb. It is one of the types of nonfinite verb forms. Its name comes from the Latin participium, a calque of Greek metochē, partaking or sharing. It is so named because the ancient Greek and Latin participles share some of the categories of the adjective and noun and some of those of the verb. Participles may correspond to the active voice, where the modified noun represents the agent of the action denoted by the verb, or to the passive voice, where the modified noun represents the patient of that action. Participles in particular languages are also often associated with certain verbal aspects or tenses. The two types of participle in English are traditionally called the present participle and the past participle. In some languages, participles can be used in the periphrastic formation of compound verb tenses, aspects, or voices. For example, one of the uses of the English present participle is to express continuous aspect, while the past participle can be used in expressions of perfect aspect and passive voice. A verb phrase based on a participle and having the function of a participle is called a participial phrase, a participial phrase. For example, looking hard at the sign and beaten by his father. A participial phrase is based respectively on an English present participle and past participle. Participial phrases generally do not require an expressed grammatical subject. Therefore, such a verb phrase also constitutes a complete clause. As such, it may be called a participle clause, a participial clause. Types of participle. Participles are often identified with a particular tense, as with the English present participle and past participle. However, this is often a matter of convention. Present participles are not necessarily associated with the expression of present time, or past participles necessarily with past time. Participles may also be identified with a particular voice, active or passive. Some languages have distinct participles for active and passive uses. In English, the present participle is essentially an active participle, while the past participle has both active and passive uses. The following examples illustrate this. I saw John eating his dinner. I have eaten my dinner. The fish was eaten by lions. A distinction is also sometimes made between adjectival participles and adverbial participles. An adverbial participle plays the role of an adverbial in the sentence in which it appears, whereas an adjectival participle plays the role of an adjective phrase. Some languages have different forms for the two types of participle. Such languages include Russian and other Slavic languages, Hungarian, and many Eskimo languages, such as Cyrenaic, which has a sophisticated participle system. Details can be found in the sections below or in the articles on the grammars of specific languages. Some descriptive grammars treat adverbial and adjectival participles as distinct lexical categories, while others include them both in a single category of participles. Sometimes different names are used. Adverbial participles in certain languages may be called converbs, gerunds, or gerundives, or transgressives. Sometimes adjectival participles come to be used as pure adjectives without any verbal characteristics. They then no longer take objects or other modifiers typical of verbs, possibly taking instead modifiers that are typical of adjectives, such as the English word very. The difference is illustrated by the following examples. The subject interesting him at the moment is Greek history. Greek history is an interesting subject. In the first sentence, interesting is used as a true participle. It acts as a verb, taking the object him, and forming the participial phrase interesting him at the moment, which then serves as an adjective phrase modifying the noun subject. However, in the second sentence interesting has become a pure adjective. It stands in an adjective's typical position before the noun. It can no longer take an object, and it could be accompanied by typical adjective modifiers such as very or quite. Similar examples are interested people, a frightened rabbit, fallen leaves, meat-eating animals. Indo-European languages, Germanic languages, English and Old English, past participles of Germanic strong verbs were marked with a ge prefix, as are most strong and weak past participles in Dutch and German today, and often by vowel change in the stem. Those of weak verbs were marked by the ending d, with or without an epenthetic vowel before it. Modern English past participles derive from these forms. Old English present participles were marked with an ending in ender. In Middle English, various forms were used in different regions: ender, inder, and inga. The last is the one that became standard, falling together with the suffix ing used to form verbal nouns. Seeing. Modern English verbs, then, have two participles. The present participle, also sometimes called the active, imperfect, or progressive participle, takes the ending ing. It is identical in form to the gerund. The term present participle is sometimes used to include the gerund, and the term gerund participle is also used. The past participle, also sometimes called the passive or perfect participle, is identical to the past tense form in the case of regular verbs, but takes various forms in the case of irregular verbs, such as sung, written, put, gone, etc. Details of participle formation can be found under English verbs in list of English or irregular verbs. The present participle, or participial phrases formed from it, are used as follows to form the progressive aspect. Jim was sleeping. As an adjective phrase modifying a noun phrase, the man sitting over there is my uncle. Adverbially, the subject being understood to be the same as that of the main clause. Looking at the plans, I gradually came to see where the problem lay. He shot the man, killing him. Similarly, but with a different subject, placed before the participle. He and I having reconciled our differences, the project then proceeded smoothly. More generally, as a clause or sentence modifier. Broadly speaking, the project was successful. Past participles, or participial phrases formed from them, are used as follows: to form the perfect aspect, the chicken has eaten; to form the passive voice, the chicken was eaten. As an adjective phrase, the chicken eaten by the children was contaminated. Adverbially, seen from this perspective, the problem presents no easy solution. In a nominative absolute construction, with the subject, the task finished, we returned home. Both types of participles are also often used as pure adjectives. Here, present participles are used in their active sense, while past participles are usually used passively, although those formed from intransitive verbs may sometimes be used with active meaning. Some such adjectives also form adverbs, such as interestingly and excitedly. The gerund is distinct from the present participle in that it acts as a noun rather than an adjective or adverb. I like sleeping. Sleeping is not allowed. There is also a pure verbal noun with the same form. For more on the distinctions between these uses of the ing verb form, see uses. For more details on uses of participles and other parts of verbs in English, see uses of English verb forms, including the sections on the present participle and past participle. Latin and Romance languages. Latin has 3 or 4 participles. Present active participle, present stem plus nse, g. almonds, he who loves. Perfect passive participle, participial stem plus us, e.g. amatus, he who is loved. Future active participle, participial stem plus urus, urum, e.g. amaturus, about love. Gerundive, present stem plus ndus ndume. G. Amandus, he who was to be loved. French. There are two basic participles, present active participle, formed by dropping the ons of the nous form of the present tense of a verb and then adding and, march and walking, at and being. Past participle formation varies according to verb group. Vendu, sold, misplaced, marché, walked, acute been, and fait, done. The sense of the past participle is passive as an adjective and in most verbal constructions with avoir, but active in verbal constructions with être, in reflexive constructions, and with some intransitive verbs. Compound participles are possible. Present perfect participle Untitled, having called, etant mort, being dead. Passive perfect participle, etant vendus, being sold, having been sold. Usage. Present participles are used as qualifiers as in un insecte volant and in some other contexts. They are never used to form tenses. The present participle is used in subordinate clauses, usually with en marche, en parlant. Past participles are used as qualifiers for nouns. La table cassée, to form compound tenses such as the perfect vous avez dit, and to form the passive voice il est acute, te acute, tu acute. Spanish. In Spanish, the present or active participle of a verb is traditionally formed with one of the suffixes ante, enter or iant, but modern grammar does not consider it a verbal form any longer, as they become adjectives and nouns on their own, e.g. amante, loving or lover, vivient, living or live. The continuous is constructed much as in English, using a conjugated form of estar plus the gerundio with the suffixes ando, iendo, or yendo. For example, estar haciendo means to be doing, and there are related constructions such as seguir haciendo, meaning to keep doing. The past participle is regularly formed with one of the suffixes ado, edo, but several verbs have an irregular form ending into ocho. The past participle is used generally as an adjective meaning a finished action, and it is variable in gender and number in these uses, and also it is used to form the compound tenses in which it is indeclinable. Some examples. As an adjective, las cartas escritas, the written letters. To form compound tenses, ha escrito una carta, has written a letter. Hellenic languages. Ancient Greek. The ancient Greek participle shares in the properties of adjectives and verbs. Like an adjective, it changes form for gender, case, and number. Like a verb, it has tense and voice, is modified by adverbs, and can take verb arguments, including an object. There is a form of the participle for every combination of tense and voice. All participles are based on the stems of the corresponding tenses. Here are the masculine nominative singular forms for a thematic and an athematic verb. Like an adjective, it can modify a noun, and can be used to embed one thought into another. Pi omicron lambda lambda kappa alpha phi epsilon sigma epsilon iota kappa alpha pi iota sigma tau eta mu delta epsilon tau nu epsilon sigma tau rho alpha tau eta gamma 8 the sigma omicron nu tau alpha chi epsilon iota nu. He who intends to be a good general must have a great deal of ability and knowledge. In the example, the participial phrase tau nu epsilon sigma tau rho alpha tau eta gamma 8 the sigma omicron nu tau alpha, literally, the one going to be a good general, is used to embed the idea epsilon sigma tau rho alpha tau eta gamma 8 the sigma epsilon iota. He will be a good general within the main verb. The participle is very widely used in ancient Greek, especially in prose. Celtic languages. Welsh. In Welsh, the effect of a participle in the active voice is constructed by yn followed by the verb noun and wedi followed by the verb noun. There is no mutation in either case. In the passive voice, participles are usually replaced by a compound phrase such as wedi calau in contemporary Welsh and by the impersonal form in classical Welsh. Slavic languages. Polish. The Polish word for participle is imyslo. There are 4 types of imysloe in 2 classes: adjectival participle, active adjectival participle, robiac, doing, one who does; passive adjectival participle, robani, being done; adverbial participle, present adverbial participle, robiac, doing, while doing; perfect adverbial participle, zarobici, having done; dangling participle. Due to the distinction between adjectival and adverbial participles, in Polish it is practically impossible to make a dangling participle mistake in the classical English meaning of the term. For instance, in the sentence, "I have found them hiding in the closet," it is unclear whether I or them is hiding in the closet. In Polish, there is a clear distinction. Znalazłamik, choajak zw Sophie. Choajak is a present adverbial participle regarding the subject. Znalazłamik choajasij zw Sophie. Choajasij is an active adjectival participle regarding the object. Russian. Verb, present active, hearing, who hears. Present passive, being heard, that is heard, or audible. Past active, who heard, who was hearing. Past passive, that was heard, that was being heard. Adverbial present active, hearing. Adverbial past active, having been hearing. Verb, past active, who has heard. Past passive, that has been heard. Adverbial past active, having heard. Future participles formed from perfective verbs are technically possible, though not considered a part of standard language. Bulgarian. Verb, pravha present active, pravast past active, aorist, pravil past active imperfect, praval past passive, praven. Adverbial present active, pravajki. Verb, napravu past active, aorist, napravil past active imperfect, napraval past passive, napraven. Participles are adjectives formed as verbs. Macedonian completely lost or transformed the participles of the common Slavic, unlike the other Slavic languages. The following is noted: present active participle, it transformed into verbal adverb. Present passive participle. There are some isolated cases of present passive participle, such as the word past active participle. There is only one word of the past active participle, which is the word. However, this word is often substituted with the word past passive participle, transformed into verbal adjective. Resultative participle, transformed into verbal L form. It is not a participle since it doesn't function attributively. Baltic languages. Lithuanian. Among Indo-European languages, the Lithuanian language is unique for having 13 different participial forms of the verb, that can be grouped into 5 when accounting for inflection by tense. Some of these are also inflected by gender and case. For example, the verb it has the active participle forms einas, einantis, etas, aishes, idaves, the passive participle forms einamas, atus, isinas, the adverbial participles einand, adus, ancient, idavis, the semi-participle idamas and the participle of necessity atinas. The active, passive and the semi-participles are inflected by gender and the active, passive and necessity ones are inflected by case. Semitic languages. Arabic. The Arabic verb has 2 participles, an active participle and a passive participle, and the form of the participle is predictable by inspection of the dictionary form of the verb. These participles are inflected for gender, number and case, but not person. Arabic participles are employed syntactically in a variety of ways, as nouns, as adjectives or even as verbs. The uses vary across varieties of Arabic. In general, the active participle describes a property of the syntactic subject of the verb from which it derives, whilst the passive participles describes the object. For example, from the verb kataba, the active participle is katib and the passive participle is maktub. Roughly these translate to writing and written respectively. However, they have different derived lexical uses. Katib is further lexicalized as writer, author, and maktub as letter. In classical Arabic, these participles do not participate in verbal constructions with auxiliaries the same way as their English counterparts do, and rarely take on a verbal meaning in a sentence. In certain dialects of Arabic, however, it is much more common for the participles, especially the active participle, to have verbal force in the sentence. For example, in dialects of the Levant, the active participle is a structure that describes the state of the syntactic subject after the action of the verb from which it derives has taken place. Akil, the active participle of akala, describes one's state after having eaten something. Therefore, it can be used in analogous way to the English present perfect. Other verbs, such as raha, give a participle which has a progressive meaning. The exact tensor continuity of these participles is therefore determined by the nature of the specific verb and the syntactic, semantic context of the utterance. What ties them all together is that they describe the subject of the verb from which they derive. The passive participles in certain dialects can be used as a sort of passive voice, but more often than not, are used in the various lexicalized senses as adjectives and nouns. Finno-Ugric languages. Finnish uses 6 participles to convey different meanings. Below is a table displaying the declension of the participles of the verb tapa. The participles work in the following way. Each and every one of these participles can be used as adjectives, which means that some of them can be turned into nouns. Other languages. Cyrenaic Eskimo language, an extinct Eskimo Aleutian language, has separate sets of adverbial participles and adjectival participles. Different from in English, adverbial participles are conjugated to reflect the person and number of their implicit subjects. Hence, while in English a sentence like, "If I were a marksman, I would kill walruses," requires 2 full clauses. In Cyrenaic Eskimo, one of these may be replaced with an adverbial participle. Esperanto has 6 different participle conjugations, active and passive for past, present and future. The participles are formed as follows. For example, a fallantabotello is a bottle that will fall. A fallantabotello is one that is falling through the air. After it hits the floor, it is a fallantabotello. These examples use the active participles, but the usage of the passive participles is similar. A cake that is going to be divided is a dividotakuko. When it is in the process of being divided, it is a dividotakuko. Having been cut, it is now a dividitakuko. These participles can be used in conjunction with the verb to be esti, forming 18 compound tenses. However, this soon becomes complicated and often unnecessary, and is only frequently used when rigorous translation of English is required. An example of this would be "La nabo estos instruta," or "the boy will have been taught." This example sentence is then in the future anterior. When the suffix "o" is used, instead of "a," then the participle refers to a person. A manganto is someone who is eating. A manginto is someone who ate. A manganto is someone who will eat. Also, a mangito is someone who was eaten. A mongato is someone who is being eaten, and a mangato is someone who'll be eaten. These rules hold true to all verbs, and there are no exceptions. An informal addition to these 6 of the participles for conditional forms, which use unt. The active participles are the only ones generally used. For example, a commencuntur is a person who would begun. A paroluntur is someone who would spoken.